the best response you can have to a payoff in a thriller is someone goes, "Oh, right, I forgot. Of course, I should have."
On Story offers a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers, creators, and filmmakers. All of our content is recorded live at Austin Film Festival and our year-round events. To view previous episodes, visit onstory.tv. On Story is brought to you in part by the Alice Clayburgh Reynolds Foundation, a Texas family providing innovative funding since 1979. From Austin Film Festival, this is On Story, a look inside the creative process from today's leading writers, creators, and filmmakers. This week's On Story, American Gods writer and co-developer Michael Green.
None of it's ever easy. Whatever you're not doing seems like the easier thing. If you're doing an original, adapting seems like a dream. If you're adapting an original, seems like a dream. It's different muscle groups.
In this episode, Michael Green discusses American Gods, the critically acclaimed Starz fantasy drama he co-developed with Bryan Fuller.
What's a god? They're real if you believe in them. So who are you? You wouldn't believe in me if I told you.
He does not know our world.
I'm easing him in.
You've gotten yourself mixed up in some really weird shadow.
You think I'm spent?
You're as forgotten and as unloved as any of us.
I'm doing just fine.
You trying to start a war?
We're at war already, and we're losing. Who's after you?
Times, they are changing.
We need you to fight them, to show them who we are.
They are gods, for God's sake!
So what's the plan? War.
So you got this huge show, a lot of responsibility, and it's down to you and it's down to Bryan Fuller. Neil Gaiman seems to be involved in some way. Where does he come into play when you make the show?
He's been great. So Neil writes this book, and it's bananas, and it spends all those years with people trying to adapt it and not being able to. And Bryan and I were like, oh, it'll be easy. And it kind of was. Like, the writing part has always been joyous. When we start getting into like script to screen, script in this show is weirdly, I can't say it's easy because writing is always hard, but it's sort of in the normal range of difficult. Like, it's hard to write a great script that you're super proud of, but producing the show is the hardest thing either Bryan or I have ever done in our careers. It's an order of magnitude larger than what everyone and we've had some amazing artists come through, and it's a lot of the same team that worked on Hannibal, for example. But in Hannibal, the average budget was like $3.6 million an episode, and ours is literally 3 times that. Sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less. So it's just, it took all of our efforts marshaled. And I'm thinking of the pain we went through so much that I actually forgot the question.
Neil Gaiman.
Neil Gaiman. So he comes in, of course. So Neil, who is not a part of the trauma, he's actually great. He really wants the show to work. And so we come to him early on and tell him, like, for season 2, which we're writing right now, we went and pitched him what we imagined the arc for the first season was. And Bryan and I definitely take a yes and approach to each other's ideas, to the room's ideas. And Neil does too. It's like, this sounds great. You could also do this, or here's how to build that out. And we get his enthusiasms. And because he's lived with it as long as he has and, wrote the book, he's able to put up warning cones for us. Like, when you're here, be careful of this. Or make sure to include that. Or, there was something I always wanted, this has been a big one, something I wanted to do, but I wasn't able to do because the book couldn't be 1,200 pages. So we're able to expand out on those ideas. And then every once in a while when we, just see ourselves choosing X or Y, we'll say, do you have any way to weigh in on this? Or more practically, hey, we're having a problem with a studio. Can you pretend you're on our side so that they back off?
I know that you clearly have an affinity for the book and a obligation to be faithful, but you have to expand a universe rather than just being faithful to it. And I imagine, well, tell me if this is the case, when you approach a scene, do you approach it with that in mind about how you can use it to further something rather than just portray it?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it depends which scene. You start as a fan. You don't adapt something unless you love it, because you're going to come to hate it. And I'm sorry, like, no matter what it is. Like, I got to write Blade Runner, luckiest boy in the world. By the end of it, you want to strangle Blade Runner. Like, it takes away your joy of the original material over time. So you come at it as a fan and you think, let's say we're going to go through some scenes. We have, some scenes we're going to go through and some behind the scenes stuff. But like some of them we knew we were going to do with a very high degree of fidelity. When the network asked us, like everyone asked us, how you can do the Bilquis scene, we said as written. That said, we knew we were going to change some character things. We knew we were going to change certain things to modernize it. Like, we didn't want her to be a prostitute. We wanted her to be someone who was dating online, and that was going to just give us a new angle in that would tie into later story we wanted to do. But then there are other things that we knew we were inventing completely, but it had to feel like, could this have been a missing chapter? Could this be the page you missed? And you really just start to develop your own instincts for what fits in the book. And it helps when you have a living author who's an email away who can say, that is something I wish I'd written. And one of the better compliments we'd gotten is, we knew that our first 3 episodes were going to do the book sort of first 50, 60 pages, but still ins and outs, changing dialogue, borrowing lines from dialogue, stealing lines of dialogue, and really just letting ourselves have our way with it while still trying to enliven what was there. But our 4th episode was going to be completely off book. And that was a strategy. We knew that was the Laura episode where we introduced her as a character. And we always looked at it as, we're going to have a new pilot that could have been episode 1 that's going to tell us the entire story of the show from her perspective so that she becomes the 3rd leg of the 3-legged stool.
Laura? Hey, Audrey. Audrey. Audrey, don't call the police.
Get out of my house, you zombie whore!
Audrey, please don't call the police, okay? I'm gonna come in now. Okay? Audrey?
What? Go away, what the are you?
Audrey, this would be embarrassing under any circumstance, but it's particularly embarrassing under this circumstance. Nevertheless, I really need to use your toilet.
By that point, crazy fans, tattooed pictures and words from the book on their body fans would trust us enough because we'd done the book as they imagined it or as they thought they imagined it. But then the other thing is, when you're adapting anything, you don't want to just do the high school play. Anyone can take a novel and just type down the dialogue and that scene work, but that's not the job. The job is to make it your own and impress your personality consciously and unconsciously onto it. And that's okay.
Hello, Shadow. Don't with me.
That is one of those scenes that 50-50 what went into the planning for it and 50-50 discoveries after make it what it is. Because I can look at shots there and go, that was something that became awesome because we had to fix something that that didn't get right, and in post you make a discovery. So we had this pilot director who did our first 3 episodes, David Slade, mad genius, wonderful guy. I love working with him. And he had an unarticulated credo that if there's a hard way of doing something, let's do it that way. And so he had a few ideas that were very much fundamental to him just in the early theory days of things. One was this idea of, what does magic look like in our world? And that's whenever you're doing anything that's genre, you have to make those decisions. And we talked about the 3 basic levels of reality in the show. And again, these are not rules. You start talking about these things just to have a vocabulary. But it was going to be, what is grounded reality? Which we still wanted to be heightened. We wanted to be beautiful. We looked at like Thelma and Louise as, if that's what driving across America looks like, that's still a pretty beautiful heightened version of reality. Then you have when things start getting wooey, like the Croc Bar, and you're dealing with magic being done, but it's still pretty terrestrial, clear violations of physics that are discernible. And then you would have what we called God flesh. Like, this is where things go bananas. And David Slade really wanted to work on this technology of those two shots where he's all tiled and, hello shadow, and then languages of Iris, those two moments. He worked with the VFX team to develop this bananas expensive, crazy, no one had ever heard of it rig that we called the Slade-R rig, which was like 4 cameras that captured the live performances, so that instead of animating on top of with the dots, which is usually the way, it was actually just like a skinned performance that we were then able, that the visual effects company Bouffe, Pierre Lebouf's company out in France, Paris, were able to then skin with whatever we wanted, those kooky tiles. And it ended up being very much a laboratory experiment that was both very, very successful because it got us these shots that I found very just jarring and like weird. It was usefully weird, but also failure because it didn't do exactly what we wanted it to do. It was a lot of like, trying to get from here to Houston the long way around the world. You can just kind of go the shorter way. But it yielded something unlike anything we'd seen before. The other thing was, may as well show. Do we have did we get the image of the
car? Yeah.
So you can see when the thing goes collapses and expands. That was practical. David had them build a set so that they could actually like expand and contract, like a rabbit ear antenna. It was a great idea. We have a few shots in there that lasted. It was, our production team, it was one of those things that like on the day half worked, like, and it locked up and seized. But it did create this sort of vertiginous experience that we could then support with visual effects and get what we wanted. But the yield of it in the end was really surprising. So it was one of the few conversations we had with the network stars who were very supportive of it. They didn't really understand the show, but they kind of wanted to help us get to something that they could eventually understand. And this was one of the things we fought about. Most of our fights were very genial. This one was kind of hilarious. I remember the first cut we showed them wasn't a great cut. It got to a good place, but we showed it to them in progress, and because we owed it to them, and we wanted to hear what they had to see. And this was one of the things where they said, so we don't get this scene. We think you should reshoot it entirely. We said, what do you mean? We think the performances are great. They said, so we don't understand this scene because we jumped in, Shadow got nabbed. We had this very weird thing to get him in there. And they said, when you get to that scene, we don't understand there's a car because we didn't see an establishing shot of the car before, which sounded to us like we got annoyed because that was just a very literal, networky sort of thing to say. And they said, we think you should reshoot it in a regular limo and just be a plain old limo because, and then this is where they got themselves in trouble. They said, because this kind of feels like a virtual reality environment. And, if you're going to do that, you may as well just do that. And we said, we'll do that. So what we did was so that first shot we came in where it's like the travel on his, over the reflection on his eyes, and leaned into like that thing where the whole thing unfolds in front of him, and the idea of the droogs, lawyers make us call it the children, tiling out and kind of unfolding as if printed in front of him. Those were all discoveries after the fact, because we're like, well, if we're going to go 3D, let's Spite do it and really lean into it. And then, of course it gets that place where they're like, okay, you did it. We meant the other way, but I guess it's this.
Well, Technical Boy here is different than the book, which in some ways he has to be. If he's going to be technology, the book was made in 2004. We don't live in 2004 anymore. And I think if he was, on MySpace, it wouldn't have.
Yeah, that was one of the more easy pieces of adaptation. I mean, we've got to ask that question a lot. Like, Technical Boy need to feel of the moment, and he's the kind of guy who recreates himself generationally as technology changes. And of course, now our technology changes minute to minute and is obsessed with reinventing itself. So we could lean into that. Here's someone who's, I see it in Bruce's performance all the time. There's sort of a core anxiety in him that he feels like he's not enough because he knows he's being outmoded as he's speaking to you. We knew we wanted to end the episode with something really, really upsetting. So Shadow's then taken out of the car and beaten to hell. And then they literally put him in a tree by his neck. And we knew that was going to be upsetting, but we also knew that we were going to be talking about race in America and that we weren't going to take that lightly.
Right.
But that was, we knew we were ending on something that we were going to be very nervous about seeing ourselves.
Yeah.
We knew, you put a noose around a black man's neck. That is, we knew that was combustible material. But we also know we wanted to unpack that. We knew we wanted to unpack that, and whether we unpacked it successfully or not is open for debate. There are days I'm mad at us for not going deeper. We followed instinct. There are moments we stole a little bit from later in the book where Shadow is beaten to a near pulp and Laura saves him. Spoiler: Laura gets him out of that bad situation. Episode 4. You should have seen it by now. And so we knew we were going to borrow that, and it was still faithful to the book, but purposed differently. We needed an end of an episode because we knew we wanted to end it there. And it's one of those instinct. I couldn't even tell you which one of us pitched it when we were on our first board in Brian's office in his home. And it just felt right. And in a show like this, if it feels right, you just do it.
A good segue. We're talking about race. We're talking about bad words. Should we talk about the Nancy scene?
Sure. So the Mr. Nancy scene, Orlando Jones. I mean, the greatest. You can applaud. I will tell him you got applause. He will love that. he loves applause. So when you have a chance to create a show, and especially when you're going straight to series, you have the chance to be bold, because all they can do is cancel it. That's it, right? And if you're in fear of that, then you. And we also were emboldened by our partners on the show in the form of our network and studio, who generally are the nervous people, but they said, we want you to go for it. And when we said we wanted to, talk about race in America and what we thought was only going to be we made the show never expecting the world to look like it was. Like, we made it under a progressive administration, expecting a female president and even more progressive administration. So it turned out that this thing aired when we didn't expect it would be a statement. We just wanted to say some stuff, and we knew that we had a lead who's going to be mixed race, and we knew we were going to have gods coming from other cultures, and we were going to talk about immigration, and immigration stories were always uplifting. And then for the show to air during a time when immigration suddenly became a hot button issue, something that people would look at and literally spit on, was shocking to us, upsetting to us. So we were very glad we had done things like the scene of Mr. Nancy's introduction, but had wished we'd gone further. But it was definitely Brian Fuller and I, two white guys, writing an African slave ship, and we knew we were playing with fire, and we had to try. We had to try that representation, and we knew that we would go to people who who were African American and had lived an experience that this would be speaking to, and talk to them about it and say, hey, here's our draft of this. We probably missed. Please tell us what we did right or wrong so we can do it better. Because to not try would be the mistake. And that was a great process. And Orlando Jones was one of our first partners on it, because he was able to say, let me run with most of this. Like, let me do this.
Let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, a man got... Now, how is that for a story? Because that's the story of black people in America. You all don't know you black yet. You think you just people. Let me be the first to tell you that you are all black.
We knew that we wanted all of our Coming to Americas to have sort of a bent lens, Terry Gilliam-y, Coen Brothers. We wanted to just not, it was never going to be historical. Guillermo Navarro shot that. He didn't get credit for it. He's this wonderful director, Mexican-American, former DP, Academy Award-winning DP, Guillermo Navarro. And I believe he got, it's one of those pieces that he did amazingly, the actors did amazingly. We told our casting department we need someone who speaks a language that is from the region where they may have worshipped Nancy. And we went like as far north as we can go, but we managed to find this wonderful actor, Confidence, who actually taught the other actor how to say his line correctly. And then Orlando Jones comes in, and I think he uses like 7 discrete dialects in that one speech. But I'll say it was just a privilege to be a part of. I remember watching the dailies. Brian and I were watching the dailies the next day to see like, oh, how are we ashamed or are we proud? And we had actually heard it from the set, but it made a difference to see it. The first take where Orlando got up and did the whole speech all the way through those mohawks of dialogue, and the 50 extras there stood up and applauded for him. And it took place not after Ferguson, and it was a damn good chance we were going to offend everyone. And by the way, many people were offended by this, and that's so fair. It's totally okay. But most people were not, and that's better. And Yeah, I can say a lot about that, but I'm just really grateful for everyone who helped make it real. Because for Brian and I, it was like, I remember we were talking, and let me tell you a story. Once upon a time, a man got, and like once we heard that line from each other, writing it was quick and easy. But we knew that like writing was like 1% of what this battle was going to be.
I've only been on 3 other dates from the computer. I don't think I have the talent for it. Meeting you, I'm glad my kids forced me into getting on that stupid thing.
You like me?
The character in the book was a Hollywood producer, sort of in the, bless you, in the ugly mold that we're seeing in the news today. And she was a prostitute. And he was a John, so that no one would miss him. And we wanted someone who was incredibly sweet. And we knew we were going to kill him, but he would die happy. And it really came down to that, like, I love you at the end, which was a flourish that we wanted to see that old gods give as much as they take. And this was going to be the most literal version of it. I remember, if maybe there's an indication of how Brian and I work together. Rarely we ever point and say, that was my line, that was his line. But there's, I'd written a line for him, you're the sexy, you don't think I'm old, you don't think I'm spent, when she says that to him. And he says, you're the sexiest thing I ever got to touch for free. And I questioned it, like it was in there, and I just went to Brian, I'm like, I think we should take it out. It makes me seem like just one of those, and it kind of objectifies her. And he's like, no, it's super sweet. I'm like, but it also makes him, sort of, nope, it's, and it was one of those, like, sometimes you have to argue with your partner to not ruin the things that they've given you that you liked, even if they start to hate it. And that's very true of any type of creative partnership.
I imagine pressure was on when you wrote this scene. That's the one everyone asked you about. How did you approach it? Did you approach it, and where in the timeline did you write this, like, right away to get over with, or how did that work?
There was nothing we were afraid to write. There were, if there's ever a scene, especially in a show like this, that it's kind of a bummer to write, and you're like, let's just get someone else to do that, it shouldn't be in your show. This is one where narrative is so wonky, where you can jump around so much. Only do things if you really want to. We were excited. It was more like, we never really argued about who should write what. It was always like someone had already started writing it. Someone had really had it in their teeth. No, there was no fear in this. It was really like, how are we going to make it believable? How are we going to make it? It was more about fear of negatives. How are we going to make it not goofy? How are we going to make it not silly? How are we going to make it not exploitative? Some might say it's all those things, and I look at some shots there and go, could still have done that better. I was looking at the Mr. Nancy last spider shot, and I still have notes on it. But no, it was, we knew it was going to be in the pilot. And Neil approved that because he said, I put it on page 40, whatever, of the book, because he wanted people reading it to know this is a book in which these things happen. And we knew that this and Strong Coming to America were going to be tonal land grabs, telling people this is the kind of series it is.
How does that pitch session go with the set designer? Of like, we need a bed that will seem like a man is swallowed by a woman.
It's more about problem solving, creative problem solving together. It's director, us, production designer, coming around going, how are we going to do this? We know what the goal, we have the pages. So we storyboard it. David Slade, our director on this, really spent a lot of time thinking about it. And he also wanted to feel grand and worshipful. Again, second level of the what is magic in this world. He was the one who actually came to us and said, I want to do this weird thing of proportions where she seems to grow in size. And that helped him understand as a director the fitting object A into object B. When object A is currently larger, she becomes grand. Is it real, or is it just in that moment of she's becoming a goddess in front of him? I understood it as almost like, yes, we're blurring the lines of lovemaking and worship. And if he was 6'10", 300 pounds, he might not have come up with that. He was actually trying to depict something that was in his brain of the moments he's felt most connected to someone, whether it's worship, whether it's sex. I don't know. We didn't get into that, but I can imagine in his imagination that that's the way it was. It's a filthy show, so we can talk about this. That helped him understand it. But for me, I was very much pragmatist of, I just need to believe his body is tilting up, that the angles had to work. And there's still some shots where I feel like we didn't get it, but for those seeing it for the first time, they just end up pretty enraptured. The sound design was going to be very important. We got it very dreamy. The music, I remember arguing with Brian in the sound mix when we were talking about the music for the top of the scene. I said, shouldn't we start with it feeling more romantic and then show the turn when it gets dangerous? And it was one of those, he felt so passionately that I had to go with him on it, where it was like, no, this is a spider trap for minute one. The audience knows that it's dangerous. Let them know it's dangerous. As soon as we're in that house, you're in the spider's den and she's the spider and she's a vampire, and that's okay. So that it felt dangerous from the first minute and you were wondering what it's going to be. And I understood it. And what I got excited about that is the surprise was when you realize this isn't a vampire, she's not going to kill him, that this is something you've, I think, quite literally never seen before.
You've been watching a conversation with Michael Green on OnStory. OnStory is part of a growing number of programs in Austin Film Festival's OnStory project, including the OnStory PBS series, now streaming online, the OnStory radio program and podcast in collaboration with Public Radio International, and the OnStory book series available on Amazon. To find out more about OnStory and Austin Film Festival, visit onstory.tv or austinfilmfestival.com.